Good evening and welcome to Will's webinar. Can you believe another month has gone already? Yes, I am Will. You might not recognize me with my new beard. I've decided to finally grow up and make myself look nice and manly. So here I am in my beard. So yes, it is the same guy. But I'm really looking forward to this evening because I've got Marilyn Devonish, who is known as the NeuroSuccess coach, live with us, and we're going to be getting stuck into a really interesting topic. It's something that I come across first a couple of years ago, and I've worked with it, I've used it, I've played with it. It's still something that's very new for me, but it's something that I'm really interested to be able to share with you guys, or I share with you guys, but Marilyn share with you guys as a result of joining us on the webinar this evening. So first of all, good evening, Marilyn.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
No, it's genuinely an absolute pleasure to be able to have you, and I know the guys are really in for a treat. So before we get cracking, I just want to check that everybody can hear us okay, because sometimes we have a few technical difficulties. So if you are tuning in and you're not in the Elite Network community, what I'd love you to do is, rather than comment in the comments on the Demio platform, join our Facebook group, because we have an official, let me see if I can bring it up. We have an official thread where all of the comments can be kept, all your questions can be kept. We can reply to certain things. Marilyn's in the group. She can reply to stuff afterwards if need be. But yeah, rather than we have it all on the platform and then we finish the webinar and the webinar goes. So yeah, we want to keep it all in one place, and that will be really cool. So yeah, so make sure you join the group, and if you can comment on that thread, just let us know that you can hear us okay, and it'd be great to know where you're tuning in from. Again, just let us know where you're tuning in from, and that you can hear us all okay, and then we will get underway.
And John in the thread has said he's hearing fine, so I can see that comment.
Fantastic. So that's all good. So at least we know that it is working. But yeah, let us know where you're tuning in from on the official thread in the group. I have posted the link to the group in the chat. So for people that maybe don't know too much about you and maybe aren't aware of the work that you've done and what you do, please let us know.
Oh, it's a big one. In a nutshell, for the last, coming up to 19 years now, I've been a coach and NLP trainer and a hypnotherapist, timeline therapy, and probably about 20 different modalities in terms of that. And also alongside that, worked as a management consultant and Prince 2 project manager, working in central and local government. So seemingly very different environments, but they do actually cross-fertilize each other, which is great. And as many people came to be in personal development, I would say it felt more by accident than design. It was not a choice I would have consciously made, but having fallen into it, I decided to stay.
Cool. One of the things that I love doing, and I love connecting with incredible people like yourself that are doing amazing work, and there's lots of us that now are involved in doing similar things, NLP and timeline therapy and hypnosis. There's lots of, like you said, lots of different modalities, but there's lots of us doing very similar things. But the thing that I'm always really interested in is why, like how people don't just wake up one day and go, I want to become a NeuroSuccess coach and I want to learn all of these incredible technologies. There's normally a little bit of a story to it. Now, you might be the first person that I've ever met that doesn't have an interesting story as how they got into doing this work. But I very much doubt that. So, yeah, what was it that got you into this, and how did it all come about?
I would say the one sentence version is I was studying to be a chartered accountant, and I gave that up overnight to become a hypnotherapist. That's the very short version. The slightly longer version is I was very quiet and very shy, lacking in confidence, very self-esteem. I know. I couldn't even talk to my own family, and I was working on a project when I was studying, just doing some kind of sideline projects, and I spoke to someone who recommended what I thought was a communication skills course. So I signed up for this course, got the joining instructions a few days later, and realized I'd inadvertently signed up for a practitioner. So NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, this thing called Huna. So I actually phoned them up and I said, I think there's been a mistake. This isn't what I signed up for. Can I please have a refund? and they wouldn't give me a refund, but did the line, you know, if you don't get massive value, we'll give you a refund at the end. So now I'm hopping mad, because you're now going to make me sit in a room for 7 days and listen to all this stuff, which is clearly nonsense, because I'd done a business studies degree at that point, postgraduate marketing diploma with the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I'm halfway through my ACCA exams. There was no way on God's green earth that hypnosis was ever going to be anything credible for me. But I just went then with the intention of getting my money back. And actually for the first 3.5 days, sat at the back with a face like thunder, and just looking to pick holes in the whole system, such that when I went to get my refund at the end of the week, they couldn't fault it. And probably halfway through, I thought, you know what, if I just sit and moan and pick holes for the entire 7 days, they're probably going to find a loophole and say, well, you didn't play full out. So I thought, right, you're not going to catch me on that one. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to do everything you ask me to do. And I'm going to prove to you that this is a load of nonsense. And by the end of the 7 days, I was a complete convert, decided to stay and do the master practitioner. That was in October 2000. And in May 2001, became a trainer of NLP and hypnosis and timeline therapy. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, fantastic. And so you went in wanting to be able to learn to communicate maybe more effectively, didn't think that this was going to be for you, and then completely converted and a changed woman as a result of the intervention and doing the work, which is incredible and very much something that I completely understand. And we were actually running a practitioner course this week at the office, and I say to everybody at the beginning of the week, life's never going to be the same again. You know, life will never be the same again. The things you're going to learn, experience, partake in this week will change your life. And it's quite cliche these days, it gets chucked around, but yeah. So obviously you mentioned there's a number of different modalities that you learn, but we're going to be specifically diving into Huna and Ho'oponopono. I've already learned something this evening as we were having a bit of a chat beforehand that I wasn't aware of. So again, for people that are just curious and aren't aware of Ho'oponopono or Huna, never heard of it, but thought, oh, what's this stuff? I want to find out more about it. Please, let's go into it. So what is Huna? What is Ho'oponopono?
Huna is a ancient healing and empowerment modality. So originates in Hawaii, is said to be about 35,000 years old, and is all about self-empowerment and is also about connection to the universe. Works with the premise of, and there are lots of correspondences. That's one of the things I really liked about it when I first went out to Hawaii to study. One of the first things they talked about was correspondence. So for example, Reiki uses symbols, as does Huna. The Native American tradition uses dream time, so does Huna. Other traditions use herbs, so does Huna. The Hermetics work with the 4 and 5 elements, as did the Egyptians, so does Huna. So there were lots of correspondences to things I'd come across. But it's about empowerment, and it's about the energy that runs through your system, and also about connection to the higher self and connection to the world and the universe that we live in. And it's a way of empowering self. One of the elements that people often know a little bit about, at least, is the thing called Ho'oponopono, which is about the forgiveness process. And that all ties into the whole thing about being a clearer vessel, I guess, not, releasing and letting go of old baggage, releasing and letting go of old energy and old karma. But for me, of all the 20 modalities that I do, Huna is always right up there as one of my favorites, because it is so powerful. And I think one of the things I really love about it is I can sit here in North London and do a Huna session with a client in Australia. And even if they've got no idea what I'm doing, I'll get an email going, did you do Huna today? Because it really knows no bounds. And I think the reason I am so taken with it is because when I was in angry mode on the practitioner training, the person running the training asked for a volunteer. Now, I volunteered slightly to be facetious because I'm collecting evidence that this is all rubbish. And by the end of the hour, even though he hadn't done anything except annoy me for an hour going, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? And I'm thinking, I'm feeling the same because you haven't done anything. Something I will tell you. And by the end of the hour, the thing I was working on was just gone. I was like, are you kidding me? But it, you know, and a big part of the symbols in terms of when I'm working with my clients is the symbols. It's very much also centers on the breath. It talks about the premise of mana, which is the energy that runs through your system, and the premise being the more mana you have, the more energy you have, and also the more energy you have to create Huna magic. So there will be lots of correspondences in terms of what people recognize, and I just love it. It's one of my absolute favorites.
Okay, cool. So if people right now, they're listening and it sparked an interest and they're like, okay, I get it. Clearly she's very passionate about it. They understand, and they understand that it's from where it's originated from. What is it that's actually being done? How is it actually being used? How do people actually use Huna?
One of the ways that I use it, like for example, when I run trainings, I will set the room up. So I will use Huna symbols in the room. I'll give you a couple of examples, maybe in terms of that have happened with clients. That will give you maybe a better steer. So one of my clients, well, he wasn't a client at the time. I was on a training for someone else. I was doing some coaching for them. There's a guy in the room who just had, I saw him sitting at the back and he looked like he was just about to pass out, one of the other trainers. And I said, are you all right? And he says, oh, I've just got this horrendous migraine. And so at the back of the room, there's 100 people sitting in front of us. And I says, well, do you want me to do a bit of energy work? And he sort of did the almost half roll in his eyes. Like 2 minutes later, he looked up and he went, what the hell was that? And I said, oh, it's this thing called Huna. I'll tell you about it later. I've had that experience. There's a big conference that happens every year. I'm the host and the MC for the event. So you've got people like Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, you know, they're all there for the 3 days. And the first time I was the MC, I was just going on stage and the person who runs it said, oh, I've just seen Grenfell Towers are here, because it was just after the fire had happened. He says, can you do something for the group, like a meditation or something? So I'm on stage, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So I decided just to do 2 minutes of Huna. Nobody knew who the hell I was or what I was doing. And there's 550 people in that room. For the next 3 days, I couldn't walk 2 steps without somebody coming and saying, oh my God, when you started waving your hands about and doing that thing, I have had neck pain, it's gone. I had a migraine, it's gone. I was confused, I feel better now. I was having hot flushes, now they've disappeared. I was thinking of going home because I was so tired and confused, now I'm okay. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And that for me is one of the things that often happens with Huna. One of my clients she walks in and I said, what would you like to work on? We only had an hour. She says, I hate my life, I hate my job, I hate the people I work with, and I'm being underpaid. And I was like, okay, so not much to do then. And I thought, what's the quickest thing I know to work on this? So we do some Huna, some other stuff, off she goes. Phones up the next day, says, what have you done to my boss? I'm like, I don't know your boss. What happened? She says, I got into the office for the first time ever. We had a social conversation. And I was like looking around thinking, who is this person? And then she says, later on in the afternoon, they called me into the office. And I sort of thought, oh, here we go. Sat down. And they said, oh, we've been looking through the personnel files and we realized you're being underpaid. So effective immediately, we're giving you a pay rise. It wasn't appraisal time. It wasn't pay rise time. It was nothing time. Another of my clients was having real problems with a neighbor, where the neighbor had parked a rusty car partly on my client's driveway. And that meant when my client had clients or friends come round, they would have to park on the neighbor's driveway. The neighbor would then come out and start an altercation. My client then had to come out, big arguments. This has been going on for 9 months. He's driving one day, I say, look, pull over, let's do some ho'oponopono, let's cut the energy around this thing, because another big thing had happened. The next day, his wife opens the door, she calls him out and she says, David, come here. So he rocks up to the door. She looks at him and she says, is Marilyn a white witch? Because he had told her what we'd done that day on the motorway. The next day, the car was gone, just gone, moved, disappeared, you know, vamoose. And he then told another friend about it, who is a contractor, and he'd been out of contract for 9 months. And he said, oh, I'll speak to Marilyn, she can help you unblock any challenges, stuff that's going on. And lovely guy called Lack Loy, he said, look, I'm going for interviews, I'm going for work. Suddenly out of the blue, something goes wrong, the contracts just disappear. He said, I'm kind of getting to the end of my reserve and my savings now. It's been almost a year. David told me about the session, so we just did something over the phone. Next day, what always happens is within 48 hours, I normally get a call going, you're not going to believe what's happened. So I'm like, hi, Lack, how you going? He says, you're not going to believe this. I said, oh, what happened? Even though I could already guess. He said, one of the contracts that just was dead in the water, they've just called. They want me to start tomorrow. And because he'd been at home for 9 months, you know, taking the kids and looking after the kids, he actually said to them, can I start on Monday? And that has happened several times, where oftentimes another client was out of contract weirdly for 9 months. We do the Huna. She then sends me a Facebook message saying, Marilyn, I've got a problem. I was like, oh yeah, what's happened? She said, I've been offered 2 jobs. I don't know which one to pick. So it is just, there are things I can't explain it. I'm now given up trying to explain, because there'll be times if I'm doing a coaching program with someone, a client comes into my mind, I think about them and go, do I need to send them some energy? And I'll just do stuff. They have no idea where I am. They've got no idea what I'm doing. And they will either email or turn up for the session and go, what did you do on Wednesday? Did you do some Huna? Because they felt it. And they felt whatever was going on for them, clearing, disappearing, resolved. So it works in the most mysterious of ways. And that when I don't drink, but when I was growing up, there was an advert for Heineken, and it said Heineken refreshes the parts other beers cannot reach. And that is the way I've seen Huna work, because to have 550 people all have a completely different experience, but really powerful experience in the same room, in the same place, after a couple of minutes, it's just like, whoa, there's some good stuff going on here. So that in a nutshell are just maybe some of the ways that will give you an inkling of how you can use it and what what it can do.
So I've got 2 questions. My first question is then, so is it's something that can be done to you without you realizing that it's happening?
With their permission, of course. With their permission, I don't just go.
Okay, all right, okay, cool. So they still have to be open to it, and okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it only for existing challenges? So if someone's got an existing challenge, that's what you. Whereas some people have had a challenge in the past that's still showing up in the form of emotional baggage that they're still bringing up with them, and it's still putting them into a less desired state, let's say. And if that's something, so they're living in the past, the guilt, the shame, the whatever it is, and that event has happened, so it's not a happening challenge, it's something that happened, it can apply for both. I'm writing is
absolutely. And that's where something like, let's say, Ho'oponopono would come into it, because that is known as a forgiveness process. So that is a thing you would use with, if people believe in past lives, if they believe they have ancestral challenges, if they believe they have stuff going on with regards to their genealogy, if there are particular situations that have happened in the past, even if they predate this lifetime, that is, again, one of the ways that you could use it, and taking people through that whole process to cut those old ties and connections.
And when we talk about that whole process, so my understanding of Ho'oponopono is 4 phrases. I'm sorry. I always get it in the wrong order. I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you.
Yeah.
Always in that order? Is that does it have to happen in that order?
Now, I'll be honest with you, when I went out to Hawaii, and the first time I went out was to do level 1 in 2005. I went back in 2009 to do level 2 Huna. I never heard those words spoken. And it was a few years after that I started to see them emerging. And even I was like, what's that? What's going on? I've never heard of this, because when I did Huna, Ho'oponopono is a process in its own right, which involves bringing out a metaphorical stage. It involves working with what you call the Huna guides, the Avaiku. It involves blades of white light, cutting what we call the Arca connections, which are the energetic connections between you and the people that you have a challenge with, be that now or in the past. It involves working with the higher self. So it's a whole process. And those words really didn't come into it at all. The Ho'oponopono I know is an actual process which you would take a client through. It's a guided process to cut those old energetic ties. There is a forgiveness element to it, and that's both you forgiving yourself and forgiving the other person and asking for a mutual sense of forgiveness. So I guess there's a bit of an overlap there. But in terms of the version that I learned out in Hawaii, it's an actual process as opposed to, and I think the words are great because anything that helps people move on gives them a sense of being able to do something and take charge, I think is amazing. And it's just different to the Ho'oponopono that I learned out in Hawaii.
Okay, cool. So when would be a time that someone would use Ho'oponopono? So what would they be feeling or experiencing or thinking in order for them to think, yep, Ho'oponopono is the strategy that I need to use?
If they're stuck, things that have happened in the past just still keep recurring, the thing I would call emotional baggage. Brilliant for when I first started coaching. For the first probably 9 or so years, I did relationship coaching. And so oftentimes people would be even in a new relationship, but they still got the old baggage from the past. They're still having the old triggers coming up and not able to kind of move on from that and kind of clear their head, their mind, their body, their neurology. So it's absolutely brilliant for that. And the Hawaiians and the kahunas, for them, Ho'oponopono is a regular practice, because the premise is as you're out interacting with the world, you'll make links and connections with things. And in the same way you might do some spring cleaning, it's also a really great form of spring cleaning to refresh the connections, because part of the process is cutting the old energetic ties and connections. But you're not cutting somebody off, you're not cutting them out of your life, but it's almost like you cut the old stuff, clean that up, so that when the connections are remade, it's from a healthier, more ecological, more supportive place. So it's actually a regular practice. It's a self-maintenance thing, which you don't just wait for everything to pile on top of you. It's good to have that as a regular thing. And that's why, I think the phrase, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you, is a really useful one, because it's getting people into that habit of just releasing and clearing old baggage and stuff.
Sure. So, in terms of, for the people listening right now, would we be able to do a Ho'oponopono or Huna process so that they are able to experience, well, I say experience it, so they may well experience something based on what you're saying, and I truly hope they do. But more so understand what the process is in order to be able to do it, in order for that to happen.
With regards to, I'd say an easier starting point is maybe kind of coming to the Huna symbols, because those are things that once you do those, even in a recording, I've had people listen to recordings that I did 5 or 6 years ago, and they'll email and go, oh, I've just listened to a recording, I felt this and I felt that, and I'm thinking, I haven't done a webinar, what are they talking about? And the first time it happened, I emailed them back and I thought, oh, that's fantastic. What were you listening to? And they told me the name. I'm like, oh man, I did that 5 years ago. And so part of the Huna thing is the symbols. And there's what I call the quiet version, and there's the bells and whistles version. The quiet version is like an energy transmission, just like you and I are talking now. And the bells and whistles version is where you draw this, you draw the symbols on the breath, and you deliver the symbols on the breath. So the way it would sound and look, as we have a camera, is, and I always say, look, people, if you're willing to receive it, partake of it, that's great. If you're not, at this point, you just kind of say no thanks. And energetically, just kind of close your door so the energy can pass you by. But for those who are would like to kind of receive it, I'll just draw a couple of symbols just so you can see what I mean. So one of my favorites is often an opener when I'm working with clients. The literal translation is thunder comes down and strikes the earth and makes it shake. And that's a really good one for unblocking stuck energy. So the way you would draw the symbol and deliver the symbol is so you draw the symbol on the breath and you deliver the symbol on the breath. So when I'm working with clients, and often I'll go around the room and say, what do you need? Do you want to calm things down? Do you want to speed things up in terms of more motivation? Do you want to maybe open things up and have a deeper connection with self? Do you want higher self connection? Do you want to clear the emotions? And then based on what the client has said, I'll do a little protocol of that. And so we could maybe just do a quick round of Huna. And actually, if you've got people in the group, if there is something in particular, do they want to calm a situation down? Do they want to fire something up? do they want better, higher self connection? If anybody has a preference, we can do that. And if not, we'll just do a little general protocol.
Okay, guys. So there you go. So this is interactive. Like I said before, if you've got something based on what Marilyn's just mentioned that would be relevant that you would like to use, post it in the comments now, and then we can get stuck into that. I'll give you a minute or so just to type into your comments on the official thread on the Elite Network community. Obviously, you've got the link there in the chat if you're not already in our group. But if you go onto that and then write what something that you would like us to specifically target. So we're going to do this, obviously we're going to do it for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
But we're going to use their specific thing. So speak now, forever hold your peace. If there's something going on for you right now that you would like to have become unstuck and be overcome as a result of this experience this evening, then post what that thing is, and then Marilyn can create and do the work and create the process that's going to enable that to happen.
And while we're doing a bit of typing, because often people say, how comes I've never heard of this? Huna itself means secret or concealed knowledge. And the practice of Huna was actually illegal until the 1980s.
Illegal where?
In Hawaii. It was illegal
right,
to practice it. It came under the Sorcery Act of 1820. The reason being, when the Hawaiians were colonized by the Bostonians, they didn't understand what they were doing with the symbols, because a part of it also is the chanting, and they didn't understand that. For them, that fell under the guise of witchcraft. It was actually illegal to practice Huna until pretty recently. And there's also a premise of Huna is that those who are meant to live Huna in this lifetime will find it. And so it's about bringing the teachings alive again for those who are called, if you want to put it that way. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why people don't know that much about it as well. So,
sure. Okay, cool. So there's a couple of people typing. Now, there's a particular friend of mine who, so the people are going to be typing a few, and this particular friend of mine, I know that they don't use Facebook, so but they really struggle with allergies. So is allergies something that you can use this on? Does it work to that level or not?
I think one of the things I'm going to have to say, because I've seen it work in such nowadays, particularly when I'm working with this, the Huna guys are called the Avaiku. Particularly when I'm working with the Avaiku, I will start the process off. The Avaiku are like your helpers. You start the process off. I then send them off to Australia and go and sort that out for me, would you? And come back when you finish or when I need you. And for me now, I am non-descriptive. I'm not saying, oh my gosh, can we please clear the allergies? I'm saying go over to that person, help resolve whatever it is they need to resolve. You're doing that in communication with their higher self. And I have seen Huna work with physical injuries. I had a client who came to a workshop that I ran last summer. Now, I didn't know anything about her shoulder, but we were doing some Huna in the room. It was a free day for my membership group. And her husband was there, and he says, go on, tell her. Like, tell Marilyn. And he says, Kate's been having physio for 18 months on her shoulder. She's had physio, she's been to the osteopath, she's had sports massage, she's done everything, and she barely lifts her arm above her shoulder. After we did the Huna, she just put her arm straight up in the air. Now, so when I'm going around the room, I'm just doing a minute or two for each person and doing some general stuff. At no point did I say, oh, can we please heal Kate's shoulder? I was just like, yeah, let's do some Huna. And the thing I like about it, it kind of has its own intelligence in collaboration with your higher self. So when people say, oh, can you do this for my boss, my son, my brother, my sister, my daughter, I'm like, I'm not doing anything to anyone. What I'm doing, particularly when we're clearing stuff that involves other people, let's work on the aspect of you that has a representation of them inside. So with my client and the neighbor, I don't know who the neighbor is, but we worked on his representation of the neighbor. With the client, with the boss who hated her and was underpaying her, I don't know who her boss is to this day, but we worked on the representation that she holds. And so I'd say the energy might sound a little bit out there, but I'd say the energy has divine intelligence. It will go and do what it needs to do once someone has given permission, and I'm just going to be a catalyst for starting that process, and then it will go off and do whatever it needs to do.
So it's a really good point that you've made there. So one of the things that I read when I read one of the books on this called Zero Limits is it talks about how I don't know what his title was, but I'm going to say a Ho'oponopono practitioner used it to basically cure a whole hospital in a really short period of time. And for me, I'm quite a logical thinker. So for the logical thinkers that are on here thinking, this just sounds crazy, what is it? This is how I've understood this work to really happen, and what it actually does. And please correct me if you think that I'm wrong or I'm misunderstanding something. But my interpretation of it is that in order for us to have an opinion on anything, or be triggered by anything, it has nothing to do with what's going on externally whatsoever. Everything that goes on, any opinion that we have, anything we're triggered by, anything that we see to be a negative thing, is all our interpretation. So when we're doing this work to do something to somebody else or to do something to an external situation, what we're doing is we're changing our perceptions of it, or changing or being able to heal ourselves on the situation. So therefore that becomes something that there's no longer any form of charged energy towards. That's my understanding of it.
Absolutely. And while you're talking, I can see the Huna symbol is a triangle with a circle on the top of the triangle, and then there's a smaller circle in the center, which is the EO, the space between the space. But one of the things with the two sides of the triangle, what they say is a kahuna will be able to hold opposing thoughts and views and ideas, and hold them in such a way that does not cause conflict. So this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is positive, this is negative, but it doesn't stress you out. It just is. It just is. And when people have challenges, you said it yourself there, you take the energy, I call it taking the heat out of it, such that when you look at it, it's calm. So oftentimes when I'm working with a client, my first thing is to get them to a point of neutrality, which doesn't sound particularly exciting, but it is, because when you are in that place of neutrality, now you've got a jump off point. You can go either way. You can still choose, but once you are balanced, once you are calm, once there's no big charge either way, now there's a sense of freedom. Now you can kind of make those choices. Now you have a sense of clarity, but it is being able to hold those opposing forces and not be overly out of balance kind of either way. But when I'm working with clients, I'm like, no, I cannot do anything to your boyfriend or with your girlfriend or to your mother or your boss, but we can work with the representation that you hold inside. So it is exactly that. So when people come and go, oh my God, I'm like, I don't know the people they're talking about, and I'll probably never meet them. I don't need to, because they're not my client. So I'm not interfering in their energy field. So yes, that is pretty much the way I would describe it as well.
Cool. So we've had a few, and I'm going to let you pick on what you feel would be most relevant. So we've had from Sonia, we had releasing fear of rejection.
Yeah.
From Louise, we had getting unstuck with and basically struggling with clarity about which steps to take next regarding her work and income.
Yeah.
Paul said about tiredness. Sharon said about more clients, and Paul said about getting to the root of an obsessive behavior that has been had for years. So what do you think would be based on those?
Cool.
5, is it 5? Yeah.
And I'm just having a look here. Yeah, okay, cool. So what I think I'm gonna do is that's nice. Because the symbols are related to the elements, what they call the elementals, so earth, fire, water, etc. And the fifth element is this thing called the EO, which is the space within the space, which is the area of transformation and transmutation. So what we are going to do is I'm going to do a little Huna protocol, which will encompass all of the things that you've said. And oftentimes my clients have no idea what I'm doing. And there's a piece I do on the first evening of my photo reading workshop. Now, normally when I run it in the autumn, it's dark by 7 o'clock, which is when I do the bonus session. So people are sat there, probably only met me a few hours before. They've got their eyes closed, the lights are off, and I'm often going around doing all they can hear is that's all. And people will actually describe the symbol that I used when I was around them. So they'll go, oh my God, when you were near me, I felt like this waterfall. And I'm like, oh my God, I use the water symbol. Or somebody will go, man, I felt this heat in my lower back. And lo and behold, I was behind them because I felt there was a sense that we need to clear some stuff. So what I'm going to do based on that is I'm going to put together a little Huna protocol that's going to touch on all of those issues, because there's a really nice one, for example, that blows energy and mana through the system. So if someone, let's say, did have asthma, for example, or an allergy, I use this particular symbol because it's blowing energy through the circuitry. There's a really nice one that the literal translation is light pours forth from the front of the head. So for the person who needs kind of thinking and clarity, there's a great one for that. There's a really nice set of symbols for clearing fear and cutting old negative emotions. So I'll throw that into the mix. And we'll probably do a good old dose of fire energy as well to kind of burn things away. So there's nothing that anybody needs to do, depending on people's sensitivity to energy. Some people will feel some stuff. Other people go, well, sorry, is that it? Because that's what I was like on the energy training. I'm like, dude, you haven't done anything. But then the person that I was thinking of at the time that I had a problem with, I didn't tell the class. They had no idea what I was thinking about. And one of the problems I had is that person would never call me. But people say, oh, how's Marilyn? And they go, I don't know, she never calls. And I'll be like, have you not got a phone? Can you not ring me every once in a while? And after he'd done that process, I went home that night and they'd left me a voicemail. And I'm like, there must be something wrong. So I ring up, there's nothing wrong. They're just phoning for a chat. So I'm looking at the phone going, really? They asked me where I'd been. And one of the problems also was whenever they spoke to me, I felt this big. And I thought, oh, God, I'm going to have to tell them I'm taking a break from the accountancy because I should have been doing the ACCA studies, and I'm studying hypnotherapy. But I thought, I don't like lying, so let me just get it over with. Their response was, because they were pregnant at the time, they said, oh, do you think hypnotherapy will help me with the morning sickness with the twins? And from that day, we've had an absolutely brilliant relationship. And that was in October 2000. And so the thing I would say is just be open, even if you don't feel anything physically or whatever. I would always just say to my clients, just notice what you notice in terms of whatever the situation is that they've just put forward. So any questions before we get started and do a quick round of Huna?
So for the people that are sat here right now thinking, right, what do I need to do? So they're sat here, obviously they can see me, they can see you. What do they need to do for you to be able to do? So they're experiencing this like you would do the work with them as if you were sat with them as a consultant right now, working with them based on how it's going to be. So what do they need to do?
All they need to do is just, if there were one thing I would say, you give yourself permission and say, yes, I'm open to receiving the energy. That's it. That's it.
Physically say that out loud.
They can do. If you're in the middle of Starbucks, then don't say that unless you want to clear a path. But you know, if you're sat there now you just say yes. That's one of them.
So yes. What they're going to say is yes, I'm open to receiving this energy.
Absolutely.
And then
that's it. And if they are in communication and rapport with their higher self, you can also go, higher self, are we good? Do you want to join in? Let's help this thing. Because when I'm working with clients remotely, I'm having my higher self talk to their higher self and go, whatever's right and appropriate for this person, allow that energy to be delivered for them. If it's not for them, let it pass them by and they can continue on the path that they were on. So if they got rapport with higher self, all well and good. If they have no idea what I'm talking about, saying yes is absolutely more than fine.
Cool. All right, fantastic. Cool. Well, for those of you that are choosing to do that, those of you that are choosing to play full out and get stuck in with us, then hopefully you've done that or you're about to do that. If you can, let's
rock and roll.
Alrighty,
so let's see. Right, so we're going to start with That's it.
Okay, all right. So I'm really curious. I want to know. So for some people, what could they have? In fact, I don't want to pre-frame it. If anyone felt anything during that, I mean, couple of minutes, however long it was, anything that you felt at all, or maybe thoughts that popped into your mind, I'm really curious to know, because I know mine, which I'll share in a moment. But I'm curious to know. So either if you can post it on the thread in the group, ideally. If you had anything, if you felt anything whatsoever, I'm really curious to know. So yeah, I'm really curious to know.
Cool.
For me personally, I felt it was weird. I felt it's really warm in this office, and you know that feeling when you get sort of all of a sudden you get a bit of a cold chill, when you get sort of that chill up your back.
Yeah.
It was like tingles in the back of my head. Someone's just said tingles. Tingles in the back. So for me, it's like on the back of my head, back down my neck, back down the back of my back, and sort of through it's like a tingling feeling. That was the.
Well, I can just see the thread sort of on this.
Yeah, all of a sudden everyone's just popping.
So
yeah. What is it that people are saying? So Paul's Sharon tingles all over her head and neck, which is the same as what I just said. Feelings of energy passing, almost like a meditation tingles, something lifted, a swoosh of energy, felt the spine, neck and head, felt a lot of tension go through your neck and shoulders you weren't aware that you'd been holding. So for those, what was really interesting, like I say, this is the fact that so many people who do not know each other are posting these things and sharing what's going on. So Sonia said she felt hands vibrating like she was inside a white cloud. So yeah, it was very interesting, bearing in mind that every single person is watching this from a computer or phone. And so many of us are experiencing the same thing at once in any given moment. And I can say categorically, 45 minutes that we've been on those feelings at all throughout that. It was just during those 3-minute sections. And what I found was really interesting, there were certain hand patterns you did almost like a swirling motion. And as you did the swirling motion, I could feel the swirling motion throughout my back, like as you were doing that, which was really interesting from having there and just sitting there watching the hand movements as you were doing it. So yeah, very interesting indeed.
And when I first started doing these, I was on a teleseminar, so people were dialing in. And I remember the very, very first time I did it, I did Huna and something called Access Consciousness. And I've been running teleseminars since the days where, this is no word of a lie, I would ring a guy and say, I'm running a teleseminar on Tuesday at 7:30. So at 7:30, he would press a button, and then 2 weeks later, a CD would appear in the post with the webinar. Then I would burn it and send it out to people. So people were on their phones. And I remember the first time I did this, I got halfway through. I did the first round of symbols and I opened the line. I knew there were 45 people on the line. And I said, does anyone have any questions or any feedback? Silence. Nothing. So I closed the line again, carried on, and then I phoned my friend Gina. And I says, Gina, I think I've just done a duff call. She went, Marilyn, you never do duff calls. And I went, and as I'm talking, and I see like an email come in from a guy, and he said, oh, I just didn't have the words when you open the line. But he said, I've had a neck injury for a couple of years now. He said, as you were doing the Huna over the phone, I felt the pain in the neck. He said, my neck is fine. I had somebody else the next day. She said, I've had bulimia for 10 years. She said, I went to the supermarket the next day. I loaded up the trolley with all of the binge foods. I was just on my way to the checkout, and I just suddenly, my body just went, we don't need this. Just put it all back, and just walked out the supermarket. But literally, as I put the phone down, email started coming in. People were describing what happened for them. And one woman said, Marilyn, at one point, I thought you were in the room, to the extent she got up off her sofa and looked behind the sofa to see if I was there. And I said to my friend Gina, I think I've been slightly premature. We're all good. I put the phone down and just replied to all the emails. So it is kind of amazing how it works. And the nice thing about it, if somebody's watching this recording in 5 years' time, they could have exactly the same experience just by sitting and listening to that, because the energy just kind of travels and maintains its sense of potency, is the way I might put it.
Amazing. I'm definitely going to be watching this back and experiencing or looking to experience the same thing, seeing if I had the same experience. I think is the point I'm trying to make. So fantastic. So people have had those experiences now.
Yeah.
It's lifted, the tingles, feeling like energy's moving, tension going. What can they expect potentially over the coming days, weeks now as a result of this?
One of the things on my logo, which is probably sitting behind me in various guides, I don't know if you can see it, it's a water drop. Because my logo from day one in 2001, when I kind of had the epiphany about it, has always been a water drop, where it's a ripple effect. So it's almost like we will start a process and the elements of that will continue to ripple. So people might experience the energy moving. When I say experience, it doesn't mean they have to feel it, but they may then, in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, a year's time, look back and go, oh my God, that issue where I was this, I was that, suddenly it's gone. And the thing about it, as you probably experience in your own work, is an issue will disappear and people don't even realize it's gone, because they got a new normal. And so they're not even really thinking about it. So I always just say to my clients, notice what you notice. And I think the longest I've had feedback, there was a guy, and it was a bigger process. We're doing a breakthrough process, but this was part of it. Got an email from a guy recommending a colleague for some executive coaching. And he wrote in the email, said, I've been meaning to email you and just say thank you, because the effects of the breakthrough session are still rippling throughout my life. And I read it and I thought, I'm sure it's been 10 years since I worked with that guy. And we just did a one-day breakthrough session. So I would go back through my database. Sure enough, I'd worked with him 10 years prior, had not heard from him at all since, and it was still rippling. And so I know now that 10 years is the current record, but things will just continue to shift and change and evaluate themselves. And I always say to my clients, I know everybody wants the big bang and the lightning and all the rest of it, but sometimes your system can take what it can take. So it might just be a subtle shift until that's realigned itself. And then once your system is now back in balance and restored, in Huna terms, you call it Pono, P-O-N-O. That's part of what Ho'oponopono means. Pono is to make right. So then your system gets itself back into balance again. You might have the next wave of something happening. The system can only take that much. You get back into a balance again, and then something else would happen. So I always just say to my clients, notice what you notice, and just every single time, with regards to what people shared here about being stuck and blocked and what they're feeling, every single time you notice that issue is less, even if you're not 100% there, celebrate, high five, pat on the shoulder, do the happy dance, that things are moving in the right direction. And neurologically, then you give yourself a boost anyway. no harm in a bit of serotonin and dopamine running through the system, and then continue to celebrate and notice all of the changes and improvements. And that's often how you start what I call the snowball effect.
Love that. I love that. So there's a question from John. I've got a question as well.
Yeah.
So obviously you experience this personally as a result of someone having done it to you and you benefiting from it.
Yeah.
By you going and learning this, does this mean that you are able to do it for yourself, or when you're doing it, are you always doing it for other people?
Oh God, no, I use it for myself as well. One of the things I noticed a few years ago, I went to the doctors, and it was a guy I'd never seen before. He was like a locum, and he's looking at the form, and he looked at me, and he looked at the form, and then he went like that, and I was like, oh, something going on here. And then he looked at me again, and he looked me up and down. I'm like, now I'm getting worried. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I didn't say anything because he just done my blood pressure and all that sort of stuff. And he said, Miss Devonish, so it's very unusual for one's blood pressure to improve with age. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. But what I realized was in the intervening year, what I'd started doing was monthly sessions where I would do tarot readings and Huna clearing. So do the tarot reading, whatever that brought up for the person, would use Huna to clear it. And I'd done that consistently at that point for 14 months. And so I wasn't doing Huna for myself, but I'm running the energy, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And I really, that's the only thing I did. I wasn't doing any extra exercise. I was doing my 1 week, 1 hour a week of ballet. That was it. So nothing had changed except the addition of the Huna. And what had happened is my blood pressure had improved. And I'm like, that is so cool. So the nice realization was when I'm doing it for other people, because I'm kind of like, I guess, let's say a channel or a conduit for the flow of the energy, I get the double whammy benefit as well. But I totally use it for myself. There's something called heart breathing, which I'm doing all the time. And when I was working, as a management consultant, I'm in places like the Treasury Department, Department for Transport, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Office of Deputy Prime Minister, big projects. These are like multi-million-pound projects. Often I'm running elements of those projects. There's stress. And so heart breathing and the Huna energy and what I call the waking meditation would be my absolute constant companion to keep me calm, to keep me sane, and to make sure I just wasn't going around all day ripping people's heads off. So, I totally use it for myself as well. But the nice thing is when I'm running the energy for others and just starting that off, I know that I also benefit from that, which I think is a lovely side effect.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm actually having something put together at the moment, which is basically about applied behavioral science and how we learn and the percentage of information that we retain. And ultimately it goes from passive to active. So passive is 5%. And that's just listening to something, like listening to a lecture. Then there's reading, which goes up to 10%. So again, still fairly passive, but you're starting to bring in a visual element. Then there's audio visual, so looking at something and hearing it, which is 20%. Demonstration, so seeing a demonstration is 30%. 50% is having a discussion, because then you start to bring in your kinesthetic senses. 75% is practicing doing something. So 75%, if you're practicing doing it, then you're gaining 75% retention. But the best 90% retention is when you're teaching others something. And I can vouch for that for sure. Like, I learn this stuff, a lot of this stuff I learn for my own personal benefit. And when I'm able to share that with other people, it just reinforces it. It reinforces it over and over and over again. So,
and it's always, and I know when it's running, because it's like, it's hot work. Seriously, there are times where I can be in a room that is freezing cold and I'm like sweating, because you feel the buildup of the energy. But I think, and the reason I know it works remotely, it was, I was working at DFT, so I was on a big project for smart and flexible working. I was also writing a proposal for FCO, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and I also had a hypnotherapy client after I'd done a day in London. And I get a phone call from a friend. She's crying. She was suicidal. She's phoning around all of her friends. She said, I'm just phoning to say I love you. I'm going to kill myself. And I just wanted to say bye. You've been a great friend. And I was like, you know what? I says, I'm really busy at the moment. I says, could you hold off killing yourself until tomorrow? And if that's all right, I'll do some Huna for you tonight. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, cool. So now I'm writing this proposal so I can do the handoff to someone else tomorrow. I had good intentions of doing it. By the time I finished, I did something similar to this. I did a radio interview in America as well at about 11 o'clock. And I went to bed and I was thinking about her. I fell asleep. I woke up bolt upright at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, oh my God, I didn't do the Huna. So I'm sat in bed and I'm like thinking about her in my nightdress. I go back to sleep. Next morning, I come down. There's an email from her. And she, number one, she says, I'm so sorry about last night. I'd had too much to drink. I've had a really bad time since breaking up with my boyfriend. I haven't been eating. I haven't slept for the last 3 months, blah, blah, blah. She says, but Marilyn, this is the part where you tell me I'm losing my mind. She says, even when I tell this story, I get goosebumps. She said, at 3 o'clock this morning, she said, I felt really calm, really peaceful. I had the best night's sleep I've had in months. At that point, I was like, oh my God. And I'm straight back on the email going, you are not good. And then I relay the whole story. But what was really weird about the story, even in her drunken suicidal state, the way she wrote the email, she described the order and sequence that I'd done the symbols, because I sent her a symbol for calming. I sent her a symbol for peace. I sent her it was just crazy. And that was probably in 2005. And I was like, oh my God. That was the first time I realized you didn't have to be sitting in front of me. You didn't have to be on a Skype call. You didn't have to be on the telephone. You could be anywhere doing anything and the energy would reach you. And from that day to this, I'm still astounded by the things that people come back and report as a result of doing a Huna session. It's just, for me, it's been mind blowing. And I'm surprised that 18 and a half years on, I'm still like excited by it, and I still have no idea what amazing thing is going to happen next.
Cool. So I want to ask John's question. So he said there was a mention of a higher self a little while back, and he wanted to know what you meant by higher self, or certainly your view on what the higher self is or means.
The premise is, and you might have had something similar in what you're teaching in the NLP, but you've got the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the higher self in the way that the Huna, so they call it the 3 selves. So your conscious mind is your busy, chattery mind who thinks it knows everything and thinks it's running the show. Then you've got your unconscious mind, which is vast space, I almost call it. And this is the thing that really is probably running the show, and that allows you to drive and tie your shoelaces without having to think about it. The premise of the higher self, it's almost like a guardian spirit, if you maybe want to do that. The higher self is pretty much it's almost like, the way I see it is like an observer, like an overseer, that can see everything that's going on, that has a big view, that is there to help you, but will not intervene. You have to ask. And there's one part of Huna that when I'm running the Huna intro workshops, I always say to my clients, I'm going to teach you this part, and I have a different view, but I'm going to teach you what I was taught when I was out in Hawaii, which is the premise is your conscious mind will speak to your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind would then relay the messages for the higher self. In my brain, I'm like, well, if my higher self is just sat up there already, why don't I just talk directly to it? So I will have a direct conversation. But in terms of the way, I don't know if the diagram's here, but in terms of the way the diagram is drawn, conscious mind talks to unconscious mind. Unconscious mind takes those messages, those requests, and then gives them to the higher self, which is pretty much the overseer. And the higher self, the premise in Huna terms is your higher self can come in and clear issues for you. So if somebody's having a problem from the past, if something has happened now, if there's an old issue that you want to clear, negative emotions, limiting beliefs, you name it, whatever it is, the premise is, when requested in the right way, your higher self can come in and clear that issue for you. The way I describe it to my clients often is like putting out the rubbish. Tell your higher self what you want to clear, this and this and this. Your unconscious mind relays that message. The higher self will then come in and clear those issues. So there's a process that when I'm working with groups, I'll often take them through it. I say, think about what you want to clear. We'll do some heart breathing to raise the mana, raise the energy, and we're sending the energy up to the higher self. And once we've done that as a group, we then request the higher self comes in and just takes the rubbish out. So you're just sat there, eyes open, eyes closed, whatever. Higher self comes in, goes, cool, fab, takes it away, job done. So that's the way I would, in a nutshell, describe it. Seer of all things, but has to be asked, will not just come and barge in and intervene.
Fantastic. So, yeah, John said that's great. Makes a lot of sense. So good. So, guys, looking at rounding things up. So, if you have got any questions, please post them in the Elite Network community group. And then we've got a couple more minutes with Marilyn, and we can ask those questions. Now, you mentioned earlier about you were doing some writing, and there is a book that you wrote. Stories of Transformation you wrote, and you co-authored it with some sort of pretty well-known names in the personal development industry. So Tony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, Marie Diamond, Brian Tracy, some very well-known names in this industry. So for people that maybe haven't read this book and don't know much about it, what is it, so they can consider getting it and exploring into what that is?
The book is called Stories of Transformation, and there was a weird story behind that. Seriously, this is the honest to God's truth. I'm on the phone with a friend called Gina. I was like, oh, Gina, man, love to write a book. Can't be bothered at the moment. I haven't got the time. I just like to write in someone else's book. That was a conversation, let's say on the Monday. I'm then getting ready to go to her house. As I'm leaving the house, a guy called Paul Sheely, he's the creator of something called PhotoReading, sends me an email. Hey, Marilyn, there's a book project. I think it would be perfect for you. I'd love for you to be involved. He said, we've got people like Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer. And I was like, oh my God. And he said, it's called Stories of Transformation. Would you be willing to write a story for the book? I'm like, duh. So I then arrive at my friend Gina's house. She opens the door. I was like, hi. I says, can I use your phone? Because this was back in the days where you're charged by the minute. And she went, of course. I went, I have to phone America. So I phoned the publisher, we have a chat, and I was like, I'm totally in. But the premise of the book is we've all written the story of how we have changed and transformed our life. And we have, shared a bit of the background and how we came to be doing what we're doing and all the rest of it. And then we have all written some key points and things that you can practically do in order to change and transform. So we all kind of contributed a story about that. And the overall book, is that's the one there. So it's called Stories of Transformation.
Fantastic. Okay, people can get that on Amazon if they want to, I'm guessing.
Absolutely, you can get it from my website as well, Amazon, my website. But yes, it's but it was a lovely one to be included in, and it was really like it's just what I asked for. And within 24 hours, Paul sent me the email. I'm like, I'm totally in. I didn't even need to think about it because I'd already had the conversation with my friend about that's what I want to do. So yeah.
Amazing. So I haven't seen any other questions come up. So I'm assuming that everybody hasn't got any questions. But if people have thought this is incredible, this sounds fantastic. I really would love to connect more with you, and they would love to know a little bit more about this work. Then how can they do that? How can they get in contact with you?
Easiest way is through the website. It's quite a long one. I'll say it and then I'll spell it. It's transformationstm.com, and trance is TRANCE, as in hypnotic trance, formations, F for Freddy, so FORMATIONS, TM as in trademark, so transformationstm.com. The email is marilyn@transformationstm.com, and Marilyn is MARILYN, and pretty much on all social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. It's / Marilyn Devonish, and Devonish is DEV for Victor, ONISH, and with the exception of Instagram where it's the NeuroSuccess Coach. And if people want further info about the Huna intro workshop, there's an in-person version which I run maybe once or twice a year, and now there's a video webinar version where the whole 1 day is on video webinar. That's hunaintro.eventbrite.com, and so people can either register their interest to come to the next 1 day workshop, or they can take part in the 1 day Huna video webinar workshop where I take you through the whole thing. And I'm just going to show you just as we close, just so you can get a sense of, this is just one of the Huna symbols. And so that's one of them that I put into the mix today. So there are 36 of the symbols, and that's another one that we use this evening as well. So when I'm drawing, I'm basically drawing that shape, and you draw it with the breath, and then you deliver it on the breath. So, we go through all of that on the workshop as well. But yeah, that's how you can find me.
So I just want to double check, get this. So transformationstm.com.
Yeah, and trance, TRANCE, and then it's on the homepage, I believe, in terms of if they wanted to order it from there.
I'm just popping it in the group now so that then people have got it. Fantastic. Sonia just asked, are those symbols the same as in Reiki?
No, completely different. And I have done Reiki. I probably did Reiki about 21 years ago. Completely different, but same impact, same sort of idea that, the Chokure and all that sort of stuff, but they're completely different in terms of how they look. And the way I described it when I first discovered Huna, I said it was like Reiki on steroids, because oftentimes I do Reiki, it's very gentle. And there's some of my clients, I do the Huna and they're literally like, whoosh, where it's almost like the Maxwell moment where they get pushed back in the chair. So the symbols are completely different, but you use them in a similar kind of way.
Cool. Well, look, thank you again so much for this evening, Colin, joining us. It's certainly been insightful. I know it's been an incredible experience for people, and just from seeing the comments, I know that people have absolutely loved it. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody. Thank you. And I no doubt some people will be looking to get in contact with you and connect with you on social media and all those wonderful other ways that we were able to get in contact. So thank you to you guys for coming and joining us this evening and participating, playing full out. Marilyn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Until next time, guys, make it happen.